Belle Plaine has a lot to reflect on and a lot to look forward to these days. She's hitting a career milestone. She's booked a dream concert. And she has a new album, 5 long, weird, pandemic-filled years in the making. And for more on all of it, our very good friend Belle Plaine joins us live in Regina right now. Good afternoon, Belle.
That was nice.
It's nice to have you back in studio.
Thank you.
We both closed our eyes and kind of just absorbed that golden ring.
Man, we recorded that just down the hall from the studio, and it is so good. It's still so good. Thank you, Jason Plum.
Was that whole album recorded here?
Sure was. Yeah, that's me playing guitar, singing. Megan Nash singing with me, my arch nemesis. Megan.
We'll reflect on that for a minute, since we are going to take some time to reflect on your career. What was it like making that record in such a legendary studio, which is just was next door to us? I'm personally sad that it's gone.
It was the biggest project that I had done at that point, and working with Jason was it did my head in, because he is such a composer in studio where, like, you just, especially the guitarist, would just play and play and play and play. I was like, I think we got it. And then he would just let them play, and then he composed these parts. So he just had this whole vision for things that I didn't understand, because I'd never made a record like that. What a crazy experience that was, honestly.
How crazy is it to reflect on this special anniversary? And I believe your bandmate here was the one that kind of nudged you and reminded you of it.
Yeah, we got Bryn Bessie hanging out here because I brought him along. He wanted to see inside of CBC. I was like, I know the people. We can do that.
How disappointed he is now, yeah.
No, he's very happy, I think. Dang it. What was the question, Peter?
Well, tell us about this 15-year anniversary. What are you reflecting on right now?
Okay, thank you. 15 years ago, I quit my job at the Globe Theatre, which was a really great job in the arts. And I had been watching actors be on stage every night, pursue their craft, seeing them develop, like folks like Joey Tremblay and Amy Maticio were two really big influences on me as artists from this area. And I thought, it's not going to happen if I don't get out of this dark booth and go out there and do what I've been trained to do. I have a background in classical and contemporary vocal training and recording. And, there's just been I've never made the same record twice. I made a jazz record. I made a live record. I made a country EP with Blake. I made Malice, Mercy, Grief, and Wrath, which is, this Americana sounding piece. And now the new record kind of verges into a more indie rock, but sometimes country world. Nothing really sounds the same. And I feel more comfortable with that. I never felt like that was odd, but you have to create a body of work before it starts making sense for people.
I wonder how that did make sense to you musically, going from Notes from a Waitress in 2012 to your next upcoming record. Does that just happen naturally? It's just what you are personally in touch with, what you like listening to, what you like making? How do you evolve through all those different kind of musical styles?
Well, that's it. You just said it. When we were working on this record, I sound like we're putting out a record next week. It's going to come out in January. And when we were working on it, one of the things that Paul Rigby said, I worked with this fellow, Paul Rigby from Vancouver, who's had 20 years under his belt working with Nico Case. So I've listened to him play guitar for so long. It blew my mind when he was playing my songs. And something that he said afterwards was, I felt like I was with somebody who's truly a rural person and has all of those influences of Celine Dion and Garth Brooks and Metallica and Blondie all moving through them in a way that isn't particular to an artist, but is coming through writing and the voice of the artist. And I just thought that was the nicest thing that a producer could say, was that you don't sound like anybody, but I can hear people in what you're doing.
What about life-wise? What have the last 15 years been like?
Oh, gosh. I got married, I married Blake. We had a kid. I've basically been in the same place in Regina that whole time, touring, then not touring. I think I've chilled out a lot. which is nice because I was a really anxious person and I let work and the job of work keep me up at night. And I don't do that anymore. And that feels like a huge accomplishment. Like we're in between rehearsals right now. We had a rehearsal this morning. We have a rehearsal this afternoon. And I think before that would have my brain would have frazzled a bit. But then you have a baby.
I was going to say, was it becoming a mom that helped? Yeah.
It definitely helped. Also, therapy helped. Shout out to therapy and my therapist. She comes to my shows and I'm like, we'll talk about this later. Yeah, all of that. There's so much in life that has low stakes. And I think we forget that, like buy the cheese that you never tasted before, you might like it, or go walk to work a different way. Like we get really set in routines and just like the slightest change can be so joyful. And I didn't allow that for myself until I started looking at life as being so much is just low stakes. It doesn't matter. So embrace that.
Well,
that's the difference.
It's a great segue because I'm interested in how you're embracing that kind of approach to such a big deal, a dream concert, a place, though, that I'm wondering, how after all these years, a place you walked by all these times, how it feels to be now entering Darke Hall and playing a show all to yourself.
Amazing. And it's this total old anxiety that's tapping me on the shoulder and telling me I should be worried about it. But it's also low stakes. We were talking about Chris Henderson before we walked in here, another songwriter from around here. And him and his brother Joel said, wow, you just booked it. 'Cause I had booked it 4 weeks ago. I just decided because Bryn's partner had mentioned I hadn't done a show that wasn't with the RSO or the Regina Folk Fest or all of these wonderful collaborative partners that have asked me to be part of their concert series and their festivals. I hadn't done a show in Regina since 2019 that I presented that was on my rules. And I make it sound like I'm...
What is the difference, doing that? Like you said, presenting it with your own rules as opposed to playing at a festival or a conference or a fundraiser or something like that?
Time, how long I get to play, how we break things up. It's subtle, but it is different, how I want to present depending on the lineup that's there. And I play in so many different arrangements where we do play with the symphony, and Bryn and I do a lot of duo gigs, and I do the occasional solo gig. But now that Bryn has entered my life, I'm it's not so much fun. And he likes to drive, so that's nice too. I don't have to drive everywhere. And he operates
He's giving the metal horns right now, yeah. So
skillfully. It's fun. We order the same thing at A&W usually. We stick with the program.
Which is what?
Teen burger, onion rings, usually a diet root beer, because you got to cut calories somewhere.
Nice.
When you order the onion rings, I guess.
What about Darke Hall itself? Why is it such a dream venue for you? And I mean, so many musicians have been asked this. I don't know what it's like to play there. I know what it's like to see a show. What is it like to play there?
It's gorgeous. I wanted to play there when I first 10 years ago, I did a photo shoot there. And then it was, had to be refurbished because they weren't able to put shows on anymore. And when I saw it afterwards, it's just so stunning. It's you walk in and it just does so much work for you. People walk in and they're in awe of the space and the sound. And I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the province to put on a concert. And, like I said, we've done all kinds of shows in different places, from living rooms and bars and honky tonks and dive bars. There's been a lot of bars, and traveling overseas and working with Coulter and being in some of those really large spaces in Europe. It holds up. Darke Hall holds up, and it's just down the street from me. So yeah, to book it and just really let go and enjoy being able to get on that stage. And when I call and Dawn picks up the phone and she's like, yeah, let's do it. That feels like 15 years. That feels like 15 years of reps, How
has it felt to bring the new songs with your new record, which is going to be out in January? What's it like to perform those on a stage when you've probably been at home writing them, with maybe Bryn recording them in a studio? What's it like now to bring that to the stage?
pretty terrifying.
We're back to terrifying now. I don't want to make you feel anxious again.
No, it's okay. It's good. It's the good terror where we were working on a song before we came here today that we're still getting to know it and how to approach it and what it needs and ways that we were just gripping it too tightly. And when we perform it, again, like it's low stakes.
What does that mean, gripping it too tight? Like you're just afraid to change it? Like it's like, no, it's, maybe we got to think of this different. Like, give me an example of that.
Like it's sort of maybe like when you're driving somewhere where you could just drive 5 kilometers slower and you'll have a nicer drive.
Yeah.
Or you could just be like the guy that's like kind of getting on everybody's bumper. It's that. Like just step back a little bit and like let it like look around while you're doing it instead of being like, I gotta get it right. That's loose grip.
Well, and based on what I know about this upcoming record it sounds like you have been able to step back and look at the last 5 years, or was it always written in the moment of everything since the pandemic in 2020?
There's actually some songs. There's one song from 2017 that I wrote before we put out Malice, Mercy, Grief, and Wrath. And then there's some songs that were written, being finished literally while I sang them in studio, texting lyrics back and forth between Blake to get kind of the finishing touches. And I liked coming to the recording with that approach because it brought some real knowledge of like songs that were, really cemented. And then there was stuff that was like still soft and being formed. And so it felt like everybody kind of got the best of all the worlds, where you could be like, I know this, we can just go in and do it. And then something else was like, okay, we have to be more expansive now and open and explore this. So yeah, the songs have there's all kind of different parts to it. And I'm already starting to think about the next record, which has not been my thing.
Yeah.
That's like a Blake, my husband, thing to do, where he's 3 records ahead. But
are there some words to describe the music that you're going to be putting out? Weird was one that you actually directly sent me. Is it sad? Is it hopeful? Is it all of it?
I usually stick to like trying to ask a question without giving the answer in my work, because I don't have the answer. That's why.
It's like a hypothesis.
I guess so. I think you're supposed to solve your hypothesis at the end of the paper.
No,
Maybe that's why I
not
don't
when
have
it's
a
art.
degree. Yeah, right? No, I mean, of course, making art is about just trying to elicit a response from people and letting go of what that response is. Like, some people won't like it, some people will. And that's, like, to put it bluntly, kind of none of my business. That's for people to make that decision on their own. But yeah, in terms of like where the record is coming from, I think a lot of it is specifically coming from a woman's perspective, and where before maybe I was trying to write like from a more neutral perspective. But I felt strongly about that, and I felt strongly about writing to invoke compassion in myself, because a lot of what I was seeing outside my window living in Regina, living in downtown Regina, was an uptick in homelessness, an uptick in addiction, vandalism. I was really fearful of the crime that was happening around my home, and I'm not speaking in hyperbole. We had an apartment building across the street from us, which is now boarded up after arson, and there were folks using, overdosing, dying of overdoses. There was drugs, there was human trafficking. It was really like, I would go out of my house sometimes at 6 p.m. and think like, I probably don't want to look that person in the eye, because like the gang activity was really out in the open. And it's not that that's new to the city. It was just on my doorstep.
Yeah.
And like literally on my doorstep with folks, using in our vestibules and having to ask people to, not use in my home. And I didn't want to get a hard heart. I don't want that in my life. And so I started writing to find what I could find, just to explore it and to ask questions. And so there's a song about Regina called The Weather, which is the inception. The album will be called The Weather too. And it was this idea of looking out my window, literally, and where I used to see the weather as a as an external force of nature, I was seeing this other force of nature of people dealing with their traumas and living them out in front of me. And as the weather warmed, there was more people coming out because they weren't so oppressed by, fear of dying on the street. And I wrote another song for a woman who lived across the street from me. And I feel like she's a bit of a celebrity in the city because she's so recognizable. And her name is Leah. And I never spoke to her, but everybody knew who she was. Everybody in my building, on the block, everybody knows. And I thought it is my assumption that this woman will never have a love song written for her. And for 6 years, Peter, 6 years, I tried to write this song, Love Song for Leah. I have vocal memos in my phone from 6 years ago. And finally, when I was going out to Vancouver to meet with Paul, I was like, if I don't do it, I'm never going to do it. So just sit down and do something. And that's the song that today we were working on. We're like, how do we get inside this as a band and do it live where we don't get to go back and try it again? What's our approach? So I think it's hopeful. I also think that I try to be a truth teller in my music. I don't often write from a narrative that's fictional. So, and I don't like to be overly sad in my songs because I have to sing them every night,
Right.
So it's got to be right for me too.
The weather. It's beautiful.
Thanks.
I was wondering where that came from, and I can't wait to hear the entire thing. Belle, thanks so much for this.
Thank you for having me. I just went off for a while, so thanks.